This week I had an interesting conversation with the owner of a business club here in Dubai. And she told me that the major problems their community members and business founders frequently share is that they want to scale but feel they don't have the tools or proper methodology. They feel completely alone when making important decisions. And many of them are mentally exhausted from constantly reacting to short-term tactics because the long-term strategy is not clear. And when she told me that, I immediately recognized the pattern, because this is exactly what I see when I work with founders of small and medium-sized companies. Many of them build their business from passion. They started with this inner call, intuition, lots of courage, sometimes without even formal business education or corporate experience. And this is really admirable. But it also means something very important. The company often grows faster than the internal capacity of the founder to lead it through the next stage. The strategy, the approach, or the tools that worked in the past stopped bringing results. And when that happens, the founder starts feeling that something is wrong, but it is difficult to identify what exactly. Is it strategy, the tools, motivation, knowledge? If it's the team? In most cases, it's none of those. The market might be expanding. The company might be getting more inquiries. The team might be working harder than ever. And yet, decisions feel uncertain and heavier for the founder. Results take longer. Execution becomes inconsistent. And this is the moment when many founders start pushing harder. But the real issue is different. The complexity of the company has grown beyond the internal operating readiness of the founder. And when that happens, the company cannot stabilize at the next level. Lack of clarity and focused actions bring disorder. To understand this, it helps to look at the company as a self-sustained system. There are always three layers: the company, the market, and the team. The market sets the level of opportunities. It is a bigger system that sustains the company. The company structures how that opportunities are captured. So it is a system that sustains the team and internal organization. And the team executes the work. But the most important layer is rarely considered. And this is the internal operating state of the leader, his or her readiness to sustain the next level of the company. Because the leader determines how decisions are taken, how pressure is handled, how uncertainty is navigated. He or she is the visionary who sets the rumbo and gives the impulse to the whole system. In other words, the market is a bigger system that sustains and sets the standards for the company. The company is a system that sustains and sets the standards for the team. But the leader, his or her internal capacity determines how far the company can actually go. A certain gap between these layers shows healthy business organization. The market should stretch the company should stretch the team, and leadership is one step ahead of complexity that the organization currently has. That gap creates movement, it creates ambition, it creates evolution, motivation. But when the gap becomes too large, the system starts destabilizing. It suffers internal misalignment. The leader begins carrying too much weight personally. The team struggles to keep up with the level of ambition, and the company gradually starts shrinking its behavior. And this is when growth becomes heavy, not because the opportunity is gone, but because the internal system cannot stabilize at the next level. So how does it look like in real life? You usually see these three symptoms. First, everything still depends on the founder, even if there is a team, even if there are clear responsibilities, but empowerment is missing. On paper, there is a clear structure, but in reality, the founder wants to control each and every move. Second, The team is exhausted with intensive execution, not because the strategy is too complex, but because they cannot sustain the level of ambition. This happens when the founder's internal energy is far too high compared to the team's energy. This creates an internal dissonance. When same indications are interpreted in a different way and priorities are not properly understood by the team. In the same meeting, some people immediately understand the intention and move into actions. Others hear exactly the same words, but interpret them as pressure, extra work, or another urgent demand. The words are the same. The interpretation is different. Execution becomes uneven, slow, or emotionally expensive, because perception depends on the internal state from which people are listening. And the third one is when strategy begins leaking through the leader's emotional state. People management, delegation, deadlines, risk tolerance, all of this becomes influenced by the amount of pressure the leader is capable to carry. The market response is usually slower than the manager's patience. At this stage, doing more will bring more of the same outcomes, because actions are the last step in the process chain of business growth. Before actions, there are decisions. Before decisions, there is perception. And perception is shaped by the founder's nervous system. So changing the actions is just mitigating the consequences. The origin of decisions that shape business strategy lay much deeper in the founder's nervous system. Of course, there are multiple reasons that build such decision-making pattern, but let me share with you the most common and at the same time the most unexpected ones. For many founders, the company is not just a company, it becomes something deeply personal. For example, many women founders describe their company as their baby. And from the outside, that sounds beautiful and even inspiring, like something deeper, something beyond the materialistic intention, right? But in reality, it creates an internal contradiction due to role confusion. Because when the company becomes your baby, you're no longer a strategic leader. Your brain also adopts the role of a protector and caregiver. And that makes certain decisions extremely difficult and even impossible for the founder. Closing an unprofitable project, for example, selling the company at the right moment, bringing external investors. Those decisions suddenly feel emotionally wrong, even if they are strategically correct. So the nervous system will prevail, the mother identity over rational business decisions. The founder focus would shift to carrying and protecting the baby company rather than growing a profitable and self-sustained business system. Mother instinct will prevail over strategic thinking. For many male founders, however, the pattern can be different but equally powerful. The company becomes a reflection of personal worth. If the company succeeds, I am valuable. If the company struggles, I am failing. This can be very motivating for a certain time period. But the moment the business enters a normal cyclical slowdown, the nervous system interprets it as a personal failure. And that distorts strategic clarity. And here let me be very open. If the company struggles, it means I'm not good enough. That's the indication your nervous system receives and follows. So instead of sustaining ambiguity, looking for new opportunities and adjusting for the market conditions, it drives your focus to prove I'm not good enough. In both cases, the same thing happens. The founder starts feeding the company with his or her personal energy, emotional state, not strategic vision or business instinct, but emotional attachment. But the role of a leader is not to be an angel of the company. The role of the leader is to be the navigator of the system, to maintain clarity in uncertainty, to correct course when needed, to act under ambiguity rather than waiting for perfect conditions. This is why I work in the intersection of internal energy, applied neuroscience, and strategic execution. Strategy doesn't fail because it is wrong. Strategy fails when the leader cannot hold the level of pressure required to execute it. So I don't fix businesses, I don't add more frameworks, I don't motivate founders. I identify decision-making patterns that influence negotiations, strategies, and leadership. Together we calibrate the internal operating readiness and increase leadership capacity so growth becomes lighter. Because that internal operating state determines how much pressure you can hold, how clearly you see strategic options, and how stable your company becomes as it grows. And once that internal capacity stabilizes, the entire system begins functioning differently. So if you are a founder of a company or a member of leadership team, these 3 self-reflections will give clarity. The first one, what is your relationship with your company? Is it your baby? Is it a reflection of your personal value, your identity? Or is it a system you are calmly navigating towards the next stage? Another question to answer, when do you step out of the captain role and start doing the work of the team? Is it truly because the team is incapable, or because the idea of empowering others still feels risky? And the third one, if your number of customers doubled tomorrow, what would be your first worry? What would be the weakest area of the current system? Is it decision-making, leadership alignment, delegation, operational readiness, or emotional readiness under pressure? These questions often reveal the real scaling constraint of the company. So most companies don't stop growing because of the market. They stop growing because the next level of complexity becomes higher than the leadership nervous system can comfortably hold. Your company will not scale to the level of your ambition. It will scale to the level of leadership capacity that can sustain the next level of complexity. And when founders reach this stage, they usually realize that the real problem is not strategy anymore. It is the level of complexity their internal operating system is able to carry. That is the level where real scaling begins.